Good morning to everybody. Great to have so many people joining us from all over. I'm seeing quite the geographic diversity in the chat. Definitely let us know where you're coming from if you haven't already. I'm coming to you from the way east coast of the U.S. I'm on Mount Desert Island in Maine, which is where Acadia National Park is. For those of you who are following the national parks. And I see a couple of my Jax colleagues signing on from different campuses, which is great. Um, and yeah, just to get started, before we get into developing an accessibility champion network, I want to let you know just a little about where I work, the Jackson Laboratory. The Jackson Laboratory is an independent nonprofit biomedical research institution with a mission to discover precise genomic solutions for disease and empower the global biomedical community in the shared quest to improve human health. And like Luis said, um, I work as a senior instructional designer in the online and digital education space at the Jackson Laboratory, where we design self-paced genetics and genomics modules that are freely accessible to a global audience. And the topics range from cancer, rare disease, to mouse genetics, stem cells, um, all kinds of things that represent the lab's different areas of expertise and research. Um, all right. So thanks for continuing to tell me where you're coming in from. What are we going to cover today? Well, we're going to start by analyzing some current organizational and systemic barriers to promoting and improving accessibility. Then we're going to move into outlining the process of initiating an accessibility champion network, talk about some best practices for facilitating meetings and the general group culture of the Accessibility Champion Network. Think about some potential benefits that we might get from participating or leading one of these groups, and think about what are some of our next steps. So hopefully you will leave today's session with an idea of like, what is this structure? Why is it useful? And what is like one step you could take to implement something similar in your professional life? Um, so let's start with a chat in. I'm curious about what are some barriers to adopting accessible practices in your organization? So I know that if you're at this conference, you're highly motivated to learn more about accessibility. Maybe not everybody you work with is, right? Or maybe there's some inconsistencies in accessibility in your organization. I'm curious, what are some of those obstacles? So I'm hearing from Nicole, no funding or support mandate from leadership, no buy-in from leadership, not prioritized. Caitlin saying working in a highly decentralized, complex environment, leadership not prioritizing accessibility, not everyone believes of the value of accessibility and inclusive practice. No one needs it here. Definitely heard that one before. Culture, no time, people to help do the work. Working with a massive, oh, I lost it. There's so many coming in, which is great. Working with a massive website where the content has existed for years, so lots of time-consuming remediation, right? That is definitely something I can relate to. Um, Leadership prioritizing accessibility, availability to accessibility, but getting the terminology wrong, reworking content that's been used for a long time. Faculty say they can't do that. Burnout, no centralized office. I'm just taking some samples. You can all read through these. Yes, the concerns around DEI and associated concepts being, illegal, right? Which accessibility definitely is not, right? In fact, there's a huge legal basis for it. Um, Leadership thinks it's already done, or we can snap our fingers. No one's on the same page. Yes, and Nicole, who started it all, is summing it up saying like, oh yeah, this is kind of depressing, right? But it shows that we're experiencing the same barriers, right? And hopefully we're going to work through some of those challenges and come out on the other side of the session with a little bit of hope. So let's look at some numbers. Because, honestly, my experience is that most professionals express that they do want their physical and digital spaces to be inclusive and accessible. So I think generally intention isn't the problem. It can be sometimes, but generally, it's my experience that people are in support of the idea of accessibility. Um, if not for ethical reasons, then at least for business or compliance reasons, right? Or legal reasons. But there's a gap, right, between intention and execution. And here's some stats to back this up. So I got many of these statistics from an organization called Web Accessibility in Mind, called abbreviated WebAIM, which is a wonderful resource for digital accessibility. And they had a 2026 report of the top million websites, and they found that 95.9% of homepages had detected WCAG2 failures. And WCAG meaning the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines that are the gold legal standard, right? Uh, this number actually had increased, reversing a trend of small improvements from each of the previous 6 years. And it suggests that full WCAG conformance is lower than 4%, probably. So that's kind of shocking, right? That, the top million websites have that volume of WCAG2 failures. And in WebAIM's 2021 survey of web accessibility practitioners, they found that only about half of respondents thought their organization products were highly accessible. Okay. So why is there this gap? Well, first, we don't know, and we don't know that we don't know, is the short answer. There was a survey done again by WebAIM in 2021 that found that 12.5%, all right, that's 1 in 8 of web accessibility practitioners said that they learned about accessibility in their formal schooling. So they got a degree, right, in UX or computer science or instructional design or whatever it is, right? And only 1 out of 8 people learned about accessibility during that program. Okay. So, often we try to fill those gaps, right, with workforce training, right? Probably many of you on this meeting are involved in those kinds of ventures, right? So only 52% of professionals surveyed in 2025 reported that their organization helped employees develop skills in digital accessibility. And that's coming from the UK-based AbilityNet. And, instructional design, right, which is my background, where it's not immune. There was a 2023 paper by the ID researcher Mohan Yang et al. And they noted that instructional design graduates often lack the knowledge and awareness of accessibility in approaching their design projects, mainly due to the lack of accessibility training in their existing curriculum. Going forward with organizational statistics, the same report from AbilityNet revealed that only about 25% of professionals surveyed said they had confidence in their organization's digital accessibility knowledge. And these numbers really help solidify what we just saw in the chat, all right? So everybody's kind of saying like, oh yeah, there's all these issues going on. And it's like, okay, it's not just us, right, who are coming to this conference individually, right? It's being experienced writ large. So one of the things that these reports also state is that for those that lack support, like many of you expressed, individual commitment is one of the key drivers to digital accessibility. Individual commitment is one of the key drivers. However, anecdotally, my own experience and survey of the literature has revealed that folks are often super overwhelmed, right? And just don't have time, or they express that they don't have time. So basically, yeah, thanks for the reacts in the Zoom. So basically, while the intention, right, is to create digitally accessible products and learning experience, the training and the systemic support is inconsistent. It's just not there consistently. With limited time, how are we going to upskill in accessible practices and stay current with the latest standards with the limited time that we have and the reality? So, one solution that I've helped facilitate is the Accessibility Champion Network. This is a grassroots solution. And at my organization, the Jackson Laboratory, we call this the Accessibility Interest Group, or AIG. And our group mission is to foster conversation and connections with other accessibility champions so that we can support each other's efforts of building accessibility into the fabric of our organization. We're here to learn from and empower each other with strategies for making digital and physical workspaces more accessible. So the basic features of this group are that we have open membership. Many different roles are represented. It spans campuses and departments. We have many campuses in my organization, from Maine to California to Florida to Connecticut and New York, and even some internationally, and a lot of remote workers and people who participate in the accessibility interest group represent like all of those. Um, we meet on a regular basis that's time zone friendly, right? Because we all are coming from different places. Um, and we have an online resource area that allows us to continue to communicate asynchronously and share resources between our regular meetings. So, how did this start? Um, well, it started as like a buddy system, actually. I had a colleague reach out to me, who I'm pretty sure is on this call now, who had some questions about accessible design. She's a UX designer. And she knew I had some interest in this and some expertise in this based on my, reputation in the organization and my involvement in our disability and chronic illness ERG. Um, And so we started talking and exchanging ideas. And we had such a good time talking that we decided maybe we could, take this to the next level. Um, Before I go there, though, I sort of realized as I was putting together the group that I had developed multiple accessibility buddies unwittingly over the years, finding people who also had a passion for accessibility and like connecting with them as a way to like commiserate around some of the challenges, as a way to get ideas, as a way to feel like I wasn't the only one who cared about this, right? And so I ended up having this kind of like disparate network, right, of many accessibility buddies. So I'm curious, is there someone in your organization or your network who you think could be an accessibility buddy? Let's not name names, but I'm curious, like what is their role? Can you chat in and let us know? So for example, it might be, fellow instructional designer. It might be um, someone on the marketing team. It might be manager, might be a UX designer. Yep, some of my buddies are saying hi. Supervisor, web content publishers. Yep. Some people already have a community going. instructional designers, accessibility specialist. Yep. Dedicated ADA guru. Uh-huh. So sometimes there's a dedicated position, right? Senior user experience strategist. Yep. So all kinds of folks. Yep. PF says that they have an accessibility team of 5 to be contacts for when they get stuck. Current university job, says Sebastian. Everyone in Sebastian's department. Nice. So people are already starting to find these communities, right? And these colleagues, right? So my buddy and I, right, we decided to launch the accessibility interest group, and we nested it as a part of the disability and chronic illness employee resource group that already existed in our organization. Um, and there were some folks who, were already in our like disparate networks of accessibility buddies, who we reached out to, who we like knew were going to be involved. And then when we put it out there and held our first inaugural meeting, there were people who came that we never met before, right? Who saw the topic and, were interested in it. And, we used all of our organizational like social media, like internal social media and our intranet and different newsletters and digital signs to like publicize it. So we made sure we had like a wide audience to invite to our group. So the first thing we did after we all said hi to each other in this inaugural meeting was we came up with some shared norms together. And the 4 norms that we came up with are first, bring an attitude of curiosity. Second, leave judgments and any expectations of perfection outside the meeting. I find with accessibility concepts, people get so scared of saying or doing the wrong thing that they just say nothing at all, right? So we really wanted to like address that from the get-go, that it's okay to ask questions or say something that you think might be wrong, right? This is a safe learning environment, and we want to be like really intentional about it. Thirdly, we want to focus on the process and commit to a shared journey. So it's not about what we any products that we ultimately create. It's about like, how can we improve our processes? How can we, you know, share ideas and have a great, space that we want to keep coming back to. And lastly, share the air, listening actively and responding compassionately. Um, I'm a person, right? That's why I'm presenting right now, who likes to, speak a lot in meetings. So I like to have this norm to remind me to step back and let other people have a moment to share the air. And then, when someone says something or shares something or has a question that, you might want to challenge, right? We want to normalize that we respond compassionately. So I think these norms are super important. And I think in like corporate organizational settings, there's often not these norms stated, and yet norms exist anyway, right? Because the culture kind of coalesces, right? Whether or not you articulate it explicitly or not. So it's always better to, in my opinion, articulate the kind of way we're going to interact with each other in a group like this as explicitly as possible, so that, you preempt any of those issues. And for those of you who have transitioned from instructional design to instructional design from education, like myself, you're probably noticing my public school teacher background showing a bit with this as well. Um, so, yay. Thank you for the hearts. Um, so, after we established these norms, we started listening. We asked the people who came to our inaugural meeting, Like, what accessibility practices are you most familiar with? What are you sort of familiar with? What are you not at all familiar with? And that basically served as like a mini needs analysis, right? Around like what are the needs of this group, and how are we going to move forward with this group? And so we created a menu of topics. Um, some of these topics included web accessibility principles. FYI, this term here, A11Y, stands for accessibility, if you don't know, because there are 11 letters between the A and the Y. And it looks like ally also. I know some people using that in the chat already. Um, so general web accessibility principles, accessible documents, right? PDFs, Word docs, PowerPoint presentations, things that people use all the time, right? Have tons of important accessibility features that nobody knows about, right? Or many of us have never learned about. Um, Accessible typography, right? Um, that includes, color contrast, right? But also writing in, fonts and creating layouts that are accessible and reduce cognitive load. Um, AI and accessibility, right? Like there's a lot of talk about that. And of course, there are tools that can help with this. But we had a discussion about like how do you use those tools and measure them against your expertise, right? Having accessibility in meetings like this, it's another topic that came up, how to advocate, and then even things having to do with like physical accessibility, for those of us who are live on campus, like emergency planning and so forth. So I'm curious, like if you were going to start a group like this, what topics would you want to cover? So do chat in and let us know. PDFs. PDFs are a huge topic, right? Um, And for anyone who's had a rodeo with Adobe Acrobat, right, you know that it's not always easy to meet those standards. So that is a really important topic. Education opportunities, nice. Like this conference, for example. We've actually had meetings that are like conference recaps. Like one of our members goes to an accessibility conference and they come back and share like what they learned, with the group. Accessibility walkthroughs of each other's websites and documents. Nice. That is a great idea. So you can see how people are using it in action. How to use screen readers for testing. Nice. Documents and forms on our website, addressing friction barriers in the office. Nice. E-learning, micro-learnings. Start with an experience for able-bodied people to understand the challenges. I'll talk about that a little more later. New policies, guidance, and impacts. Yes, there are a lot of policies, right? Like there's been a lot of talk about Title II and everything that needs to happen for that, which, hopefully had already happened, but definitely didn't for most places. Um, Legislative landscape, assistive technology. Yep. Alt text writing boot camp. Nice. I love that. Yes, being able to write alt text quickly and efficiently and effectively is so important. Um, Legal guidance, demos from people with disabilities. hmm Anything related to typography, higher ed faculty, understanding how to, like helping higher ed faculty understand how to get buy-in. Yep. PowerPoint presentations for screen readers and color blindness. Yep. What Microsoft misses. Yes, beautifully. Beautiful idea there, Jennifer. I would also add like tips and tricks for Adobe Acrobat, right? Could be a great topic because it's like, there can be a lot of frustrating moments with that you need to work through. Great. These are all great ideas. So I hope folks are writing these down, right? For your future iterations of a network of champions. So once we had, like a menu of topics, we basically put them together in a spreadsheet and invited people to sign up for different topics and say like, okay, everybody, let's take one meeting each, and you will be the facilitator for that meeting. And you don't have to be an expert in that topic, but your job is to bring something to the table for discussion. And I find that takes like the pressure off, right? Like somebody mentioned in the chat, like perfection is often like the enemy of accessibility, right? Because people are so scared of doing it wrong that or saying it wrong that it's safer just to do nothing, right? Which is really not the message we want to send. So inviting people to say, here's something I'm curious about. I'm not an expert in it, but here's a resource I found, and here's what I learned, and let's talk about it. So the basic format of our meetings is we start off with, a check-in, some greetings, see how everyone's doing, and then whoever's the facilitator for the day does a short presentation, um, just about like 15 minutes. Like maybe it's something that they know really well, like I said, or maybe it's something they're learning about and they found a resource, and they're curious about learning more. And then after that presentation, we have a discussion about it. And often we come up with a bunch of resources that people know about, right? Or we come up with more questions that we want to learn more about. And then we think about what are we going to do next? So that's our basic format. Again, my public school teacher background is showing, right? I love to have a generalized and predictable format that we can just plug into, right? Makes planning a lot easier, makes it a lot more approachable for everyone. Um, so we did this for like a year, right? And we covered a lot of topics. And we decided as we moved into our second year of the accessibility interest group, that we wanted to explore a fresh approach. So what we've been doing this year is a series called Opportunities for Empathy. And basically, these experiences, it's really a series of experiences, invite participants to consider the the lived experience of a range of disabilities and to take these into consideration in their professional practice. We started with an experience recommended by WebAIM, Web Accessibility Mind, for emulating the experience of someone with a cognitive disability. That experience was trying to make some origami based on some instructions that were presented in only one way, just with words alone. And then we repeated the process with a multimodal set of instructions that had, photographs laid out step by step. And this led to a discussion about how we can provide materials that anticipate a range of ways of thinking and processing information, right? So, like, if we're in the digital content creation space, whether we're an instructional designer, right, or marketer, or UX designer, or human resources, or anything in between, we often don't get to really have a second chance with our users, right? We create our content ahead of time, and then the users or the learners are going to interact with it, right? It's not like a live instructor-led experience where it's like, okay, I prepared this, but like I'm seeing this is not working, so I can kind of shift and improvise and make it different, right? So instead, it's super important to like think through all of those things ahead of time, right? And anticipate what are the different ways of thinking that might come to the table? What are the different learning styles or learning preferences that might come to the table? And getting all those multiple modalities built in from the get-go. Um, yes, and there's a request for Luis to save the chat from this session. That sounds like a great idea. So anyway, having these experiences of empathy allows us to think through what are some proactive steps that we can take to make our content accessible from the get-go so that when learners, enter our physical or digital space, right, they feel welcome and they also feel expected, right? Like they belong there. Um, so our second experience that we had this year was actually related to physical accessibility. And I know a lot of us are working in a digital space, but for those of us who work in a physical campus environment, right, our interest group is also geared towards having our campus be, a welcoming, accessible place for all our employees. So whoops, there's a little bit of typography problem there. Um, but I think we get the idea here. I'll fix that before I share these. We had an event called the Rollin' Challenge. Luis and I were bonding over our love of music, so of course I had to put a song into it. Rollin', rollin', rollin'. And basically, this experience invited people to spend their day on wheels, right? Carry a rolling suitcase with them all day long, um, wherever their workspace was. Yes, thank you. Right, PF says. Very good. Um, so basically, what happened is folks brought a rolling suitcase from home and were asked to spend as much of the day as they could with the suitcase, getting around the physical space of either their campus or their home office. Since we work at a biomedical research organization, we had the opportunity to hear from some scientists also who are doing research in neuromuscular disease and how they've supported those communities. And this led to a rich conversation around simple things that we can do to set up our physical spaces to meet the needs of for those who have mobility disabilities, like setting up our office spaces with sufficient room to get around with an assistive device, allowing for passing time between meetings. How many times do we go from meeting to meeting to meeting to meeting, even if we're working virtually, right? Like we got to go to the bathroom at some point, right? And if you're using a mobility um, aid or device, right, that takes more time, right? And so we need to be cognizant of that and try to build in a culture of having passing times, right, between meetings to allow for that, right? And that issue really only came to light when people had to bring their suitcase down the hall to the bathroom, right? When they experienced that. Um, there's also the idea of looking out for safety concerns, right, that might affect people throughout the campus. Like, oh, we had some people from the safety committee join us and tell us, like, oh, if you notice something that, like, you can step over, but other people might not be able to step over, right? Like, let us know about that so we can correct that, right? We have a procedure for that. If elevators are out of order, right? Let us know about that so we can make an alternative plan, right? If you're directing somebody who's a visitor on the campus, right, make sure you have an idea of the best accessible route that they can go that's going to be doable for them. Even if they're not in a wheelchair, right? There's plenty of people who have mobility concerns that are not apparent. So again, proactively thinking about how can we help folks feel welcome and expected in the environment. So we're actually having our next meeting, which we currently do on a quarterly basis, this Friday, and we're going to be taking a deep dive into screen readers and experiencing screen readers a bit, actually trying to navigate using them, seeing some demonstrations and things like that. So we've taken our group kind of from, level one, where we're putting out a lot of information about accessibility, sharing those meeting recordings, curating resources online, talking about general concepts and principles and kind of like the bread and butter, right, of accessibility to, okay, how can we deepen like our motivations for why we're doing this and to develop some empathy about what it's really like. Some of us who are in the group are disabled. Some of us are not disabled. Some of us have disabilities that are apparent. Some of us have disabilities that are not apparent, right? So it's all about having opportunities for empathy so we can design accessibility proactively in the best way that we can. So we've seen a lot of benefits from this at our organization. I'm curious, before I share some of those benefits, like what are some potential benefits of joining or starting an accessibility champion network that you can imagine, or that maybe you already have seen, right? Because some of you said like, oh, I've been doing this already. Let us know in the chat. Sharing ideas, visibility. Commiseration. Yeah, sometimes it feels like lonely to be the person who's interested in accessibility, right? Because it's not everybody is. Community. There it is again, right? Validation, innovation through collaboration, bringing awareness of the issues to others. Yeah, it's not a well-known topic. I mean, we saw only 12.5%, right, of accessibility professionals learned about it in school, right? Being surrounded by people who share the same values and passion, sharing knowledge and insights, share knowledge, being exposed to other ideas, context, and makes the connection to accessibility personal versus abstract. Yes, I love that. And I love when people are able to share, like, this is an assistive technology that I use, right? And these are some of the things that are hard for me, right? That's great when people can share those things in the group. Place for folks to turn for accessibility need questions, like how to when and go to HR. Place to send your boss for training, right? That can happen sometimes, right? Um, Gives a better understanding of the need. Yep, so much attention in the accessibility community for barriers, but almost none for, yep, cognitive and learning disabilities. So it's important to bring those to light, right? And a community, right, where we all bring something different to the table is a great way to do that. Yeah, so great benefits that you've all identified in the chat. I reached out to our members recently of our accessibility interest group, and I asked them if they might share a little snippet about what the experience of being in the group has meant for them. And I've got a few quotes that I'm going to share with you. One person wrote, AIG has improved my employee experience by connecting me with a community of accessibility champions who share knowledge, resources, and practical strategies for creating a more inclusive workplace. Insights gained through AIG have influenced how I develop materials and support employee communities across the organization. Someone else said one of the most impactful opportunities for them was researching accessible PowerPoint best practices and presenting those findings to the group. The process helped deepen my understanding of accessibility principles and gave me practical strategies that I now apply in my daily design work. So here's a great example of a person who wasn't an expert in this, right? But was curious about the topic and like developed professionally. Um, as a result of this experience, as a result of this opportunity. Um, Someone also wrote, I found that the open discussions and knowledge sharing within the group to be extremely beneficial. Hearing colleagues share their experiences, perspectives, and experiences, share their expertise perspectives and experiences has broadened my understanding of accessibility and challenged me to think more intentionally about inclusive design. Sometimes there's an idea in professional learning communities of like being a critical friend, right, in the positive sense. So like being a group of supportive people who can challenge each other, right, to think about things differently. And that's what that person's articulating. Um, and finally, one person shared that beyond the social and knowledge gains, which have been many, the biggest benefit has been that the group is evidence that I'm not alone in the goal of making our products accessible, right? Which many of you articulated. Having others by my side, taking the time to learn from one another increases the visibility of accessibility work happening at our organization. Absolutely. So before I wrap up, I'm curious, some of you already have this going, right? But what's one step you could take this week towards growing your accessibility network? It might be as simple as like reaching out to somebody on this call on LinkedIn, right? And connecting with them because there's been so many great ideas happening in the chat. Yeah, reaching out to colleagues to start one. Absolutely. LinkedIn for sure. Okay, some feedback on the slide design. That's appreciated. Other ideas for growing your accessibility network? Join our group. Okay. Absolutely. If you're part of our organization, we would love that. Ooh, a LinkedIn group. I'm certain that there are. I wonder if folks could share. Uh-huh. Okay. So I see PF is sharing. Very nice. Great. So hopefully you're coming away with at least one idea for how you can expand your accessibility network. Remember, buddy system counts, right? I found that it's more powerful to have an intentional group, but having a network of buddies or even just one buddy is like a great start because then you don't feel alone. Um, Super. And some great invitations in the chat happening now. Wonderful. So to close this out, and then we can have some time for some discussion, question and answer. I want to end with a quote from our president and CEO at the Jackson Laboratory, Lon Cardin. And he recently wrote to the organization and said, innovation doesn't happen alone. The biggest challenges are rarely solved by one person or even one institution. And he's talking about science, right? Because that's what our organization does. But I think this applies quite broadly, including to accessibility. Accessibility is fundamentally an effort to widen and strengthen the circle of our communities. So it must be addressed in community. I'm going to say that one more time. Accessibility is fundamentally an effort to widen and strengthen the circle of our communities. So it must be addressed in community. So this grassroots effort, even though we might love to have, right, stronger organizational guidance in accessibility or a chief accessibility officer or, an office of inclusion and belonging or whatever to help lead and set the policy moving forward, I think that a grassroots effort is always going to be an important part of the equation in promoting accessibility, right? Because we need to create that community and culture that we need to make our community and culture stronger, wider, better. So thank you so much for coming, and I will be very happy to answer questions or have a discussion at this time. Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Joshua. Yeah, feel free to ask a question in the chat if you have one, or I know Luis is monitoring um, the Q&A feature maybe.
Yep, I got the Q&A up. See if anybody has any questions. This is great stuff, Adam. I mean, it really kind of speaks to even what my goals are in L&D, just in general. It's funny because I went on LinkedIn. I don't go on LinkedIn that much, but I had to post something this morning about registration, and but I saw that somebody had posted a comment about how, having events like this helps with, I guess, kind of disrupting the hierarchy. And I think that,
Mm,
yeah, like having a free event that promotes accessibility and inclusive design, I mean, it's just makes sense to me. And I've had other people tell me that other like major sort of media groups and organizations have considered doing the same thing, but they're like, how are we going to make any money on this? And that's not my intent at all. It's like with TLDC, just all around. I don't make any money doing this. I do it because it just feels important to me. And so, like your topic right now is super important. Being able to create groups and communities that can support each other, especially for accessibility. I mean, it's vital. And yeah, so I love it. Oh, here we go. We got
thank
some
you.
QA. Here we go.
All right.
Um, Okay, here we go. This one's from Nicole. Are you aware of any existing research on successful strategies for convincing company leaders to commit funding and staff to DA?
Interesting. So I assume that means digital accessibility. Um, so I think we've taken like a few different approaches in our organization. I'm not aware of, research on this topic personally, although perhaps others are, and they could share that in the chat. Um, I will say that we've tried some different strategies for moving the cause of accessibility forward in our organization. And, we've kind of gone the legal compliance route, right? We've kind of gone to, appealing to, um, our leadership route. And at the end of the day, we've actually found that this grassroots group has been the most effective thing. And what has really helped is inviting people in positions of leadership to take part. Like when we did the rolling suitcase challenge, we had some folks who were fairly senior in the organization join us for that, right? And they're in the room, right, with a lot of other leaders who, have a lot of decision-making power in our organization, right? And so their empathy that they're developing, their awareness of that, right, is getting into the right rooms. So we kind of have shifted gears in the approach that we've taken towards, spotlighting accessibility to this more grassroots effort. But I know there's also like uh Lacey Feingold, I think, has great content out there about like she's a lawyer, but she has great content about um, how to approach people about the topic of accessibility in a way that's going to, actually be productive and engage them and land them and not end up in an adversarial relationship. So I would definitely suggest checking out Lacey Feingold's stuff.
Nice. All right. Let's see. I don't know if you want to read that last comment from Kimberly.
Great. I love the main connection. Yep. Thanks, Kimberly. Yes. And, one thing that's really important. Thank you, April, for the Laney Feingold. I'm so sorry. Yes, that's exactly right. Um, One thing that is important to us at our organization, right, is our mission, like I read at the beginning, is to help facilitate the global biomedical community in, finding cures, right? Our tagline is leading the search for tomorrow's cures, right? So having an accessible and uh, very disability conscious and aware workplace just dovetails perfectly with that mission, right? And it's been great to develop a community within our organization who really believes that.
Nice. Going back, I did see Amy posted a question of asking if anyone had any other ideas for an empathy lab.
Yeah. So what can you say more about what you mean by that? Do you mean like the things that we've been doing like lately called the opportunities for empathy? Um, yeah, so more ideas that we have for that. Um, it's come to our attention that there are some online games that have been designed for people who are blind or people with low vision that are audio based. And so experiencing what those games are like is a great opportunity for that. Um, One of the other initiatives that we do, it's not specifically part of the accessibility interest group, but I'm also involved in it through the Disability and Chronic Illness ERG, um, are that are American Sign Language learning efforts. So we subscribe to an app called Lingvano, and we have a community that learns ASL, and we get together and practice, right? And yesterday, I was invited to an ASL ice cream social down the street, which was first of all delicious, and second of all, really amazing experience to have to, communicate voice off, right, for an hour and a half. There were people in the room who were like very basic with ASL, like could just do a couple signs or finger spell. There were some people who there are some people who are deaf, right, who came, who are fluent in ASL, right? And, having that experience of communicating in that way was um, really eye-opening to me, right? And also just having the experience of being in a space where I didn't feel entirely comfortable was important, right? So it's like, oh, I'm in a space where we're not, speaking my first language, right? And that's an experience that a lot of people have, right?
Yeah.
Somebody wrote no mouse day, like navigating with a keyboard only. That's a fabulous idea. That's
Yeah,
a
that's a
huge
good one.
accessibility thing that comes up all the time, right? And Nicole's suggesting orderahotdog.com. Great. I'm not sure what that is, but I'm excited to learn about it.
Yeah. There's some excellent links that have come through in chat, and I'm going to try to collect those and post them. I'll probably put them on the resource page, but I just need a better way of being able to organize these links. I have so many on that resource page on the AIDC website.
Super. And yes, there are some great free accessibility conferences in addition to this one, AXCon being one of them. Absolutely. Any other questions?
Okay, I don't see any more, and we're hitting time pretty much. Oh, here we go. One more. How do you think we can get more junior designers with disabilities into the industry?
That's a great question. So I think first is like normalizing, you know, I don't want to say disclosure, but normalizing the experience of disability, right, in our workplaces, right? I'm sure that we have lots of junior designers with disabilities already there who have not, shared that, right? Um, I have found it really inspiring when people with disabilities in any field, um, have sh shared that part of themselves. And, I myself am also a person with a disability, I have an invisible disability. And, being able to share that has helped me connect with other people and also feel like, oh, okay, like this is a field that, I can grow into because other people who've had similar life experiences to me also are thriving in this field, right? Um, so I think that's one step, right? Um, Kind of normalizing disability, right, as a part of the full range of the human experience, and that is okay to talk about. And I also think saying that our live, creating, hiring practices and, committee formation practices, right, that prioritize diverse lived experiences as valuable, right? It's like because of, your lived experiences as somebody, as, a wheelchair user, right? You see things, you understand things in a way that I don't, right? Or as somebody who's an ASL user, you understand things or see things in a way that I don't, right? And that brings something to the table that really um, improves, right, the overall culture of the organization, the products we're making, et cetera, et cetera.